Board for Wednesday, April 9th. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to preserve the wetlands and to accommodate economic activity so as to prevent their despoliation. Olson, if you make a roll call.
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. McElroy?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Ms. Bowie?
Here.
We have the minutes from the March 12th meeting. Are there any changes requested?
Nope.
Get a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from the March 12th, 2025 as presented.
Those in favor?
Aye.
The public comment period offers a chance for community members to express their opinions. Topics discussed shall not be directly related to the specific public hearing items. To participate, speakers must provide their names and address for the record. Does anybody like to make a public comment? Seeing none, then we'll move to the public hearings for today. The outline for tonight's public hearing will be a staff presentation, followed by questions or clarifications from the board, and then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. Presentations before the board are subject to time limits. After everyone wishing to speak has done so and discussion among the board has concluded, the public hearing will be closed. We have our first and only case for the Wetlands Board. That's WJPA 250008. Ms. Grosjean.
Good evening, Chair. Emily Grosjean, Watershed Planner, presenting WJPA 25-0008. Mr. Daniel Winnell of Water's Edge Construction has applied for a wetlands permit on behalf of Mr. Larry Kittleberger for the replenishment of beach nourishment on property located at 1812 Cypress Isle within the James River watershed. You can see that subject parcel outlined in blue here before you, along with the James River watershed boundary outlined in yellow here. Moving in a bit closer, this is the most recent aerial photography of the site, with the subject parcel again outlined in blue, and then showing the topography and the current FEMA floodplain. A previous permit was approved under W-01-10 or VMRC permit number 09-1044 for the installation of a 50 linear foot riprap revetment to an existing breakwater, a 60 linear foot riprap revetment to a second breakwater, and 13,680 square feet of sand-filled beach nourishment. The applicant is proposing a replenishment of existing beach fill and Tombolo areas upland of existing riprap sills with Class A beach fill and 1,800 square feet of planting in the two Tombolo areas with 663 Spartina plantings on 18-inch centers. So as you see here in front of you, I've outlined the landward extent of that fill in orange here. You have two different areas. You have B to your left along with A for fill as well as plantings. The proposed planting areas on those tombolos are outlined in green and labeled A and B. Again, we have mean high on each outlined in red, along with mean low outlined in blue. That is the existing mean high and mean low. And then kind of giving you a cross section of that section A, which was to the right of the previous image, along with that median or the high and low demarcated in these two different colors here, along with section B, which was to the left in that overall site plan image. Again, mean high, mean low. Moving on with some site photos, looking to the first portion of where that replenishment is going to be occurring, along with the existing breakwater. We're looking here towards B, so you're going to have some plantings up in this area here replenished, along with the fill in these areas here. Moving on, just another shot looking kind of downward on that shoreline. Section A is going to be over here, which we'll get to in a second. And then just kind of looking back uphill, you can sort of make out in these photos some staked areas where that landward extent of that fill will be going. You can see it better along here, kind of again looking down that shoreline, and then kind of looking back up to A, where again we have existing riprap revetments and where the fill and areas will be, and then looking all the way down to area A that's being filled here, again with that existing riprap revetment, or sill, excuse me. And then just kind of, again, a long shot of both areas looking down that shoreline. As published in the Virginia Register on July 11th, 2005, the revised wetland mitigation compensation policy and supplemental guidelines as a Chesapeake Bay program partner is committed to achieve a no net loss of existing wetlands, acreage, and function in the signatories' regulatory programs. In order for a proposed project to be authorized to impact wetlands and compensate for the wetland loss in some prescribed manner, the following 3 criteria must be met. 1, all reasonable mitigative efforts, including alternative siting, which would eliminate or minimize wetland loss or disturbance, must be incorporated in the proposal. 2, the proposal must clearly be water dependent in nature. And 3, the proposal must demonstrate clearly its need to be in the wetlands and its overwhelming public and private benefits. If the proposed project cannot meet one or more of the above criteria, the project must be denied or must occur in areas outside of wetlands. Should it satisfy all 3 criteria, however, compensation for the wetland loss is required. The sequence of acceptable mitigation options should be as follows: on-site, off-site within the same watershed, mitigation banks in the same watershed, or a payment of an in lieu fee. If compensation is required, it should be a condition of the permit. Staff has reviewed this application and finds that this project meets the 3 criteria outlined above. The applicant has proposed 1,800 square feet of planting in the 2 Tombolo areas with 663 Spartina plantings on 18-inch centers. Staff has reviewed the above application and recommends approval of the application as presented. Should the board wish to approve the application, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. 1, the applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, including an erosion and sediment control plan and potential land disturbing permit. 2, all development activities located in the specified flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 Floodplain Area Regulations of the James City County zoning ordinances and receive all required approval and permits prior to commencement of such activities. 3, the applicant must submit a surety of $3,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County's Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 1,800 square feet of planting in 2 Tombolo areas with 663 Spartina plantings on 18-inch centers. The wetlands permit for this project shall expire on April 9th, 2028, if the construction has not already begun, and if an extension of the permit is needed, a written request must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than February 27th, 2028, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for staff from the board?
Not for me, thank you.
I have one. What's the main issue or factor that's contributing to the need for more beach nourishment?
To stabilize the current shoreline.
So what was done initially is not taking? I mean, beach nourishment was added before.
Yes, wave action over time has since kind of eroded that.
How long? When was it originally installed?
The original permit was done in 2010.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. Any comments from the applicant or from the public?
Evening, Mr. Chair. Obviously, I'm not the applicant, but I did talk with Danny Winall this afternoon. He apologizes for not being here. He had an emergency he had to take care of in Richmond. As Mr. McElroy inquired, original permit was done in 2010, and the breakwaters and the sand fill that was done at that time has diminished over the last couple of years, last couple winters. I believe Mr. Winall has told me has taken a hard toll on that shoreline, and they just wish to replenish.
Thank you for that clarification. Anybody from the public wish to address this matter? Not seeing any, I will bring it back to a discussion amongst the board.
Mr. Chairman, fairly routine activity, minimal disturbance and the replanting, so I have no issue with the proposal.
Do you have a question about the timing of the planting, if we have any indication about that, to ensure its success, whether it's going to happen now or wait till later?
Or from staff can answer that?
Mr. Winall is not, he'll subcontract out the planting. If the board approves his permit tonight, there's a 10-day hold on the permit by state law, and then he intends to start as soon as feasible after that. Realistically, it won't be planted until next spring, 'cause the project won't be completed until late spring, early summer, outside the optimal planting time.
I will, unless there's any more comments from the board, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the permit request for Wetlands Board Case WJPA 25-0008 at 1812 Cypress Isle.
Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Roadley?
Yes?
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
That's the extent of the casework we have in front of us. Are there any board considerations? Have any? Staff have any matters of special privilege? Then, yeah.
Did want to make it, bring to the attention to the Wetlands Board that state law did change recently in February for mitigation compliance. And the wetlands hearings in June will be updated to reflect that new guidance, and some information, more information to the board will be forthcoming by staff. If you have any questions on what that may be, Mr. Brad Reams is here from VMRC.
At the sequencing of mitigation?
Yes.
Thank you. Unless there's other matters, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Those in favor?
Aye. With that, I will call to order the Wednesday, April 9th, 2025 Chesapeake Bay Board. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries to the Chesapeake Bay. Mr. Wilson, a roll call? Here.
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. McElroy?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Ms. Bowie?
Have we all had a chance to review the minutes from the March 12th meeting and any changes or additions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from March 12th as presented.
Motion to approve as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We also have a public comment period. The public comment period offers a chance for the community members to express their opinions. Topics discussed shall not be directly related to a specific public hearing item. To participate, speakers must provide their name and address for the record. Would anybody care to address the board during the public comment period? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment period and move to hearings, public hearings. The outline for tonight's public hearings will be a staff presentation, followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. Presentations before the board are subject to time limits. After everyone wishing to speak has done so and discussion amongst the board has concluded, the public hearing will be closed. First item on the agenda is CBPA 25-0022 at 240 Jefferson's 100. Ms. Grosjean.
Chair, members of the board, Emily Grosjean, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 25-0022. Mr. Chase Grogg of Land Tech Resources Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Ms. Petra and Mr. Gerald E. Lynch III for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a building addition and the installation of gravel landscaping located at 240 Jefferson's 100 within the Kings Mill subdivision in the Skiffs Creek watershed. We have that parcel outlined in blue for you here, along with that Skiffs Creek watershed boundary outlined in yellow. Moving further in, here's the most recent aerial photography of the site in question, along with the topography, the RPA. The parcel was platted in 1989 prior to adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. The total lot size of this property is 1.59 acres, of which 89% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to add an addition to the existing single-family home and are seeking after-the-fact approval for gravel landscaping completed by the previous homeowners. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 1,860 square feet of new impervious impacts to the RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 4.5 planting units or 4 canopy trees, 8 understory trees, and 18 shrubs. The applicants have submitted a mitigation plan equaling 4.5 planting units or 50 shrubs, thus satisfying the county's mitigation requirements. Here's the site plan in front of you with the 100-foot RPA buffer outlined in red. I do not have the 50-foot buffer outlined here, but it skirts just along the outside here, keeping with the edge of water. We have the proposed additions, or multiple additions, outlined in purple as well as gray. This one should be gray. That was an error on my part. These two are administrative. The legislative portion of the addition is this purple portion here, proposed addition 1. And then outlined again in purple here and here is that existing gravel that was put in place by previous homeowners. The applicants are including it on this application just to bring it into compliance. And then moving on, it's the same site plan as before, but with those proposed mitigation plantings of 50 shrubs here, 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 and here, all within that RPA buffer. And then existing photography of the site, kind of showing you where the existing gravel is here on this portion of the site, and then moving along, starting here, looking down this side of the property, moving further in, again, that after the fact gravel put in place by the previous homeowners, and then just additional gravel here, and then it ends right about here. And then that proposed addition that will be going in here would be right along this portion of the home. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a building addition and the installation of gravel landscaping. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the proposed addition to the single-family structure encroaches further into the RPA and the gravel landscaping is considered accessory in nature and neither can be approved administratively. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions outlined before you. And staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be moderate for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicants must submit a surety of $3,500 and a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 4.5 planting units or 50 shrubs. The applicants must record an affidavit in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit, and this exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 9th, 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than February 26th, 2026, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Questions?
The gravel, you're supplementing existing gravel that's there?
No, it's just technically right now the existing gravel is not in compliance because it was done without a permit, but it was done by the previous homeowners. So the current homeowners are adding it to this application just to bring it into compliance.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. With that, I will open the public hearing with the applicant, Mr. Grog, or his agent.
Good evening, members of the board. Chase Grog with Land Tech Resources, 205 Bulifants Boulevard, Suite E, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188. Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. Mr. and Mrs. Lynch wanted to be here this evening, but had a pre-planned trip out of town. When we started this project with Mr. and Mrs. Lynch, it was our intention to have no additional impervious cover for the lot with the improvements they were considering. Once our crews completed the site work, it became evident that the proposed addition the Lynches were seeking had one small corner that did not fall on top of existing impervious cover by about 3 square feet. These additions on the right side here is a second floor addition, so they're not ground level. It's just the second floor is going to cantilever out on the walls there. So the existing, on the front side, there's a gutter pan, and on the back side, there's the HVAC. So there's this tiny little corner on the right that's really not existing impervious. With this information in hand, I began conversations with staff to determine how the project would proceed. In reviewing previous aerial photography, staff and myself noticed that a previous owner had placed stone around portions of the lot at the top of the slope. Once I discussed this with the current owners, it was determined that the stone was placed to help stabilize the existing slopes. At this point, it was determined that part of our application would need to include this existing stone by others. In evaluating the site conditions with this new information, we saw that the stone was doing a good job of trying to prevent additional sediment runoff down the surrounding slopes, and that it would be best to remain in place. We appreciate staff understanding that this was a previous condition that we are now trying to resolve through this case and not requiring the applicant to plant double mitigation. As staff mentioned, we are proposing the required mitigation for the previously installed stone, as well as what originally was planned as a very minor impact. Based on the information I've provided and staff's recommendations for this case, Mr. and Mrs. Lynch and myself request approval of their project. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Grog?
What do I mean?
Fairly straightforward, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Anybody else care to address the board on this matter? Hearing none, I'll pull it back to the board for discussion. Fairly minor encroachment, and it appears to be holding. I don't have a particular issue with the gravel or the other areas on the site plan.
I agree, Mr.
With that, I will close the public hearing. Would anybody care to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-25-0022 at 240 Jefferson's 100.
Wilson.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 25-0021 at 7260 Osprey Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mike Wilson, Section Chief, Stormwater Resource Protection, here to present case CBPA 25-0021 at 7260 Osprey Drive for Mr. Kevin and Ms. Susan Cameron. Ms. Susan Cameron has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for an approval of an accessory building and driveway extension located at 7260 Osprey Drive within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision and the Yarmouth Creek watershed. The property is further identified as James City County Real Estate Tax Map Parcel ID 19108000001. Parcel was platted in 2004 after the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Total lot size for this property is 1.35 acres, of which 62% is located within the RPA. In October of 2022, officials from the James City County Stormwater Resource Protection Division received notice that an accessory structure and driveway extension had been installed on the property without the submission of a Chesapeake Bay Preservation Exception request. The applicant is proposing to gain an after-the-fact approval of the construction of the accessory structure and driveway extension. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equal approximately 3,500 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 500 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of approximately 4,000 square feet of impact. On May 7th, 2020, county staff, including the zoning administrator, Ms. Christy Parrish, the community development director, Mr. Paul Holt, and myself, met on site at 4 o'clock with the homeowner and their builder to discuss a home addition, which was determined to be in the RPA and floodplain. At that time, it was discussed what steps were needed to get the home addition approved, including going through the Chesapeake Bay Board for their approval. In January of 2023, the zoning administrator sent a letter requesting that the building permit process be started by February 2023 for the accessory structure before the board tonight that is in question. In February of 2023, the building official sent an email documenting that this accessory structure had to be elevated or dry flood proofed. On March 20th, 2023, Ms. Parrish, Mr. Tom Coghill, the building official, and myself again met with the Camerons to explain the processes for getting their structures into compliance. On May 31st, 2023, a notice of violation was issued to the Camerons for the accessory structure violation. This notice outlined the remedies that the Camerons had to take in order to resolve the violation. They appealed and chose to go before this board for an after-the-fact approval. That hearing began on June 14th, 2023, with the exception request approval coming at the July 12, 2023 meeting. As part of that approval, the board conditioned the exception approval such that the Camerons must comply with the floodplain ordinance within the zoning ordinance, and that they submit a mitigation plan before August 12th, 2023. Neither of those conditions was met. On December 5, 2023, Ms. Parrish again sent an email listing what steps the Camerons needed to take, including deadlines that they must meet. This list included contacting Mr. Tom Coghill, starting the building permit process before June 1st, 2024, and completing the required modifications on the accessory structure by October 31st, 2024. Those deadlines were missed. The required planting mitigation for the amount of impervious cover equals 10 planting units. Because this exception is being heard before the board after the fact, staff would request that double mitigation equaling 20 planting units be completed. In the 2023 approval, the mitigation requirements were reduced and the Camerons had a chance to comply and they missed that deadline. Staff is requesting, should the board choose to approve, that full mitigation for the after-the-fact application be a condition. Staff has evaluated this application and the exception request for the approval of a garage and driveway extension. This application does meet the ordinance conditions listed in 2311 and 2314 and should be heard before this board because they are accessory in nature. This exception request is being heard by this board after the construction has already taken place. So considerations by the board are, as they are for every case, that the exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief, that granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privilege denied by Chapter 23 to any other person similarly situated, that the exception request is in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 of the James City County Code, that the exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed, which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. So staff has reviewed the application and the exception request and determined that these impacts for the proposal are major in nature. Staff recommends denial of this application due to inconsistencies with conditions 1, 2, and 4 previously listed, and recommends that the board and recommends to the board that the structure, the foundation, and the gravel fill be removed within 60 days from this hearing. However, if the board wishes to approve this request, staff does recommend that the following conditions be incorporated into that approval. That the applicant must obtain any necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. That includes compliance with the floodplain ordinance in condition number 2. That includes any necessary building permits that would have been required. That the applicant must submit a mitigation plan equaling 20 planting units, which is 20 canopy trees, 40 understory trees, and 60 shrubs to the division. That the applicant submit a surety of $15,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. That an affidavit be recorded in the James City County courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit, and that this exception request approval become null and void should conditions number 2 and 3, compliance with the floodplain regulations and the submission of a mitigation plan, not be fulfilled by June 9th, 2025. I'll direct your attention to your screens. So their request, again, is for an after-the-fact accessory building and driveway extension. Again, this was approved by the Chesapeake Bay Board on July 12, 2023, and it has expired. The vicinity map showing the property location outlined here in blue within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision and the Yarmouth Creek watershed. I want to point out to the board there are several accessory structures on this property. The only one before this board tonight is accessory structure number 1, located right here. Accessory structure number 2 is located here. Number 3, located back here. And number 4, located here, are not before the board tonight. And accessory structure number 2 would never come before the board. It is outside of the RPA. From the 2019 aerial photograph, you can see accessory structure number 4 located here in the main house here. The garage in question is located here, and it shows up right there. Accessory structure number 1. Accessory structure number 3 is not before the board tonight, but may come before the board in future meeting. Accessory structure number 4 will not come before the board here, and then accessory structure number 2 is outside the board's purview, as it is outside of the resource protection area. Topography of the site is relatively flat at elevation 4, approximately elevation floor 4. The RPA, as it impacts this site, again, it is 62% of the site. If you remember, the lot was replatted in 2004. This used to be 2 separate lots. It was combined. The common property line ran approximately here, and that line was removed so they could build, the former owner could build a house in that location. Floodplain as it affects this lot, the entire lot, and everything on this screen is within the 100-year floodplain at elevation 7. And then from the 2023 site plan, or the 2023 application, that was approved in July 12, 2023, and Mr. Grog re-uploaded it to this case. For those board members that weren't here in 2023, the yellow area is the new impervious cover in the landward 50-foot RPA buffer. The orange area is the impervious cover that was added in the seaward 50-foot RPA buffer. The pink area was a gravel access path to the existing boat ramp that the board felt they should have the ability to retain for access to the boat ramp. You will notice here that there is a pier and a boat lift. Those did get permits in 2021. I apologize for all the pop-ups. That wasn't my intent. And photographs from the original site, original application in June and July of 2023, looking at the boat garage from the house and the gravel area. Slightly different angle from the garage looking back towards the house. Coming around the side, looking at this other accessory structure here. The boat ramp is in this general area down here. That is also a different accessory structure in this location. 5 considerations that this board must consider when looking at this application. And a couple video clips from the June and July board meetings.
Applicant like to address the board. Name and address, please.
Kevin Cameron, 7260 Osprey Drive, and thank you guys for your time tonight. And I'm here to answer any questions about it. Obviously, if I'd have done things, if we could do things again, I'd have done them different in the manner that we approach them. But as far, we do have a lot of property there that we could plant. I think it could hold all the necessary plants that they're asking for.
Applicant care to address the board? Name and address, please.
Kevin Cameron, my wife here, Susan Cameron's here also. And thank you, Trevor and Robin. They've been a tremendous help, and they came out there, and I could tell they cared to actually put together a plan that might work for you guys. And I'm here at your mercy, and I appreciate your time, and I'm here to answer any questions about it.
Any questions for the applicant? Appreciate your willingness to work with staff to come to a resolution. Thank you. Applicant like to address.
So again, staff's recommendation is denial of this permit application and the removal of the accessory structure and the gravel driveway extension, should the board choose to deny by June 9th, 2025 at 60 days from the date of this hearing. The applicant does have the ability to appeal this decision should the board decide to deny, and that appeal would go to circuit court and must be made within 30 days. However, should the board choose to approve the application, staff would suggest that these conditions be added back into that approval, that they get all their other permits that are necessary, that they come into compliance with the floodplain ordinance, that a mitigation plan of 20 trees, 40 understory trees, and 60 shrubs be submitted, that they submit a $15,000 surety to guarantee those mitigation plantings, that they record a new affidavit in the courthouse, and that everything is null and void if the floodplain compliance requirement and the mitigation plan are not submitted and completed by June 9th, 2025. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So, Mr. Wilson, just to make sure that the board is not crossing wires here, we have no authority over the floodplain ordinance under the Ches Bay Board.
You are correct. You cannot say that they have to raise their building to a certain height or certain conditions, but you could say they have to bring it into compliance with that ordinance.
I just didn't want the board to be confused potentially on both that ordinance as well as our obligation of the Chesapeake Bay Act. With that said, is it my understanding, based on everything you presented, and I appreciate the thoroughness in your presentation, the reason we're here tonight, beyond the floodplain ordinance rather, is they haven't satisfied the mitigation requirement?
The floodplain ordinance requirement was a condition of the original permit, as well as the mitigation component. Both of those conditions had a time limit on them. Those time limits were not met, therefore the permit expired. The main issue is that they built the structure in the RPA. The other structure they built just in the floodplain is not before the board because it is not a board
What I was trying to
jurisdiction.
get at is, and try to seek clarity for everybody involved, is the board approved the structure as it sits currently,
They did.
subject to coming into compliance with the floodplain ordinance and completing the required mitigation?
Correct.
Thank you.
There also a condition on the previous approval on the surety.
There was. It was. It had been paid when the permit expired, and we realized we still held it. We did return that surety to the Camerons.
Okay. So now it's another condition going forward, but it was satisfied before. What about all the required permits? Were they satisfied before?
No.
Okay, so that's a third area that wasn't met.
Correct.
The other two being the mitigation plan and the floodplain compliance.
One question I have, so for the original approval that we did, that was an after the fact, so the mitigation was doubled, and now this is doubled again, is that?
That's a good question. The answer was the original mitigation was 10 planting units, and it was doubled to 20. In the June 2023 hearing, the mitigation units were 20. What was approved by the board was 4 in July. We are asking that the original 20 units be reinstated.
Thank you, sir.
Structure built as approved originally? I mean, in the RPA, it was designed certain size and
There were no plans for the original structure, so it was never approved. So I'm not sure how to answer your question, Mr.
Approved
McElroy.
after the fact.
oh, okay, that's right.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. With that, we will open the public hearing. Mr. Grog. Welcome.
Good evening again, members of the board. Chase Grog with Land Tech Resources, 205 Bullifonts Boulevard, Suite E, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188. Thank you, Mike, for your presentation and assistance with this project. I'm here tonight representing Mr. and Mrs. Cameron, who are also in attendance. Mr. and Mrs. Cameron contacted our firm at the beginning of this year to assist them in rectifying the outstanding compliance issues they have with staff from zoning, building safety and permits, and stormwater and resource protection. We are tasked with completing the required surveying and engineering documents to bring this project into compliance. Those items included a Shrinksville Soils report, elevation certificates for the 3 main structures on the lot, and a current physical survey. First, I'll start with the original required mitigation for the previously approved case. The Camerons posted the required $3,000 surety. This surety was posted back in August of 2023, and as of a month ago, was still being held by James City County. They have since then received a check back in the last couple weeks of that $3,000. In an effort to be in compliance for this meeting, the Camerons did plant 12 trees, which would have oversatisfied the previous requirement. It was not until staff's report was received this week that we were informed that mitigation would be revised due to the most recent non-compliance issues. Our goal for this meeting was to check as many required boxes as possible, and one of those was mitigation. If approved, the Camerons will plant the additional plantings within 45 days, exceeding staff's requirement. They're also willing to remove accessory structure number 4, which is not currently, is not one of your items for review this evening, but that is a shed in between the garage in question and the existing house and is roughly 250 square feet. They're willing to remove that as well as part of the mitigation. The second item we worked towards with the Camerons was the flood compliance. Though flood compliance, as you're aware, is not directly connected to wetlands in the RPA, they are normally very close together. The shed located outside of the RPA has had flood vents installed to meet flood protection requirements. The recent survey has indicated that this shed will need to be relocated to comply with a front setback issue, but will not result in any additional RPA impacts. This location issue will be addressed with the zoning department staff and the survey updated as well. The garage located in the RPA to meet building code will need to be cut in half to meet maximum square footage requirements for an accessory structure in a flood zone. Since the current CBPA case had become null and void, there was nothing the Camerons could do with this structure until this case was heard this evening. In an effort to show progress on this front, we requested a letter from the contractor that would be performing the work that they would be able to commence within 90 days of approval from this board and James City County staff. The mechanical of this building has already at an appropriate height, and thus the 2 modifications will be to cut the structure in half and install the required flood vents. It basically has 4-foot on-center studs, so the plan is to cut it in one of those 4-foot sections. With the flood zone, and an accessory structure cannot be over 600 square feet and not be brought up above the flood zone, so that is why the structure needs to be cut. Not to fully speak for the Camerons, but they are apologetic for the length of time it has taken to correct these violations. They have begun the process to fix items for this case and are very close to being fully compliant within 45 to 90 days. We hope the board will consider what I would call an extension to the original case and allow for this property to come into compliance with all zoning, building, and stormwater requests. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time, and the Camerons are here as well.
Questions for Mr. Grog?
In terms of stepping up to the compliance issues, et cetera, what would be the expected date for all of that to occur?
I think based on, I wasn't fully, the June 9th, I mean, that's what it needs to be to be in compliance with there. So there's already some mitigation there, but we will, the required plants will be, planting plan turned in, plants planted, and all be done by then. Otherwise, I don't foresee another extension.
Question for staff. Does the timeline, is it realistic, given what Mr. Grog has said, that you can bring the project into floodplain compliance by June 9th?
Well, he's asking for, if I understood him correctly, an additional 30 days, and we would be okay with that. If I understood correctly.
The letter I have, which I'll give to you for the letter we have at the moment from the builder is that they could perform the work within 90 days. And I think since we do have to work with zoning and the building department on all, because I think there'll be each of these sheds, the one on the left that is not in your consideration and this one, both have a BLDR permit number with the county. So there'll be some work with state, once the modifications are done, there'll be some items we have to do an elevation certificate. So I believe the additional 30 days would be beneficial to allow for, building maybe to be dismantled by the 60 days. We do the additional survey work because we will have to update. We have a current survey of the property, which zoning wants, which is what brought up the garage issue. So this will need to be updated to show the garage cut in half and the moved garage. But I think that's realistic.
So can you give me a date? That up on the screen, it's June 9th. I'd like to put a date in there that you think is reasonable.
Yep.
If
July 9th
July 9th,
would be our, we'll say, applicant's proposed date to allow for the plants to be planted, garage cut, surveys updated, and elevation certificates supplied to the county for BLDR permits.
any other questions for Mr. Grog?
Rog, so for the planting mitigation, they mentioned that they already planted 12 canopy trees. Is there, it's a 1.35 acre lot, is there sufficient room on the lot currently to meet 20, 40, 60 numbers? Or is that pushing it?
I mean, I think it's potentially pushing it. I also think we're in a position where, we need to mitigate. I don't know if the board would, it would be less than one credit, but if we remove the shed, that's at least some impervious within the RPA that would be removed. I mean, there is some decent grass cover.
If they were to remove that one shed, as they've talked about, we could give them credit and reduce the mitigation component accordingly.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Thank you for
Thank
your
you, Mr.
consideration.
Would anybody else care to address the board on this matter? I will pull the matter back to the board for discussion. From my standpoint, there's two issues in front of us: compliance with the floodplain ordinance and completing the mitigation plan. It sounds like they're willing to do both, mitigate as required and bring the site into compliance, or bring the structure into compliance with the floodplain ordinance. On that basis, I'm in favor of giving them the time needed to make that happen with a date certain. Drop dead.
I'm of like mind.
I would agree with that as well.
That said, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
If there's further comments, I'd be willing to make a motion.
Good.
A motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception requests for Chesapeake Bay Board, case number CBPA 25-0021 at 7260 Osprey Drive.
Motion to approve.
Now, Mr. Wilson, the motion to approve would be in light of these requirements behind me, with the exception being the July 9th date as opposed to June 9th. And the mitigation plan adjusted accordingly.
Okay, so you want to your motion is to approve as staff recommended, except for reducing the mitigation, taking into account the structure removal and changing the date from June 9th to July 9th.
Correct.
And that includes the removal of the 250 square foot structure.
That's in addition to that. And then you
Yeah.
might, with the reduction in the mitigation plan, I think the surety is tied 1-to-1 to that. I don't know whether you
We
want
can reduce the surety accordingly as well.
the proportionate amount.
Everybody clear what we're voting on? Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt as amended. Mr. McElroy? Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie? Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 25-0020 at 104 Poway Circle.
Evening, Chairman, members of the board. Amanda Frazier, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 25-0020. Mr. Seth McQuaid of Hertzler and George has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. James and Miss Nancy Kennedy for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of retaining walls located at 104 Poway Circle within the First Colony subdivision in the James River watershed. The parcel was platted in 1963 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here you can see the parcel outlined in blue and the watershed boundary outlined in yellow. Recent aerial photography of the subject parcel. The scope of work will be conducted in this area. Photo showing the topography of the site, the RPA buffer extending to this portion of the property. The total lot size of this property is 0.6 acres, of which 55% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct retaining walls at the rear of the property leading down to Lake Paspahay to limit erosion. The applicants will also remove an unapproved dock and stone landscaping installed by a previous owner. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 158 square feet of administrative impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA buffer and 94 square feet of legislative impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA buffer for a total of 252 square feet of impacts to the RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1 planting unit, 1 canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 3 shrubs. The applicants have submitted a mitigation plan equaling 1 planting unit, therefore satisfying the county's mitigation requirements. So here we have the site plan. This is the existing dock that they're proposing to remove. This is the administratively approved access path, and the retaining walls are outlined in orange here. Look at the site plan. The board staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of retaining walls. The application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of retaining walls is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions, which you have before you. I'm going to back up a little bit and show you the site photos. Here, coming around the corner of the house, you can see the existing stone and the dock located here. More photos of the unapproved stone and the dock. Looking back up the slope, they're going to be removing the stonework that was unapproved and done by a previous owner in this section as well. these steps truly pose a tripping hazard for the current owners, and that's another motivation to remove it. Showing the slope. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, and the applicants must submit a surety of $1,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 1 planting unit. This exception request approval will become null and void if the construction has not begun by April 9th, 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than February 26, 2026, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. I'd be happy to take any questions at
Any
this time.
questions? Thank you very much. Would anybody care to address, I'll open the public hearing. Would anybody care to address the board on this matter? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Appears to be an improved solution to an existing condition.
I would agree. I would be in support of this application.
I have a motion.
Motion to accept for case number CBPA 250020 at 104 Poway Circle.
Mr. Wilson,
Motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy?
Yep.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 25-0025 at 5 Tay River.
Evening Board, Emily Grogine, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 25-0025. Mr. Corey Bell of Williams Landscape and Design Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Scott Lockwood for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a walkway, patio, and fire pit located at 5 Tay River within the Fords Colony subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. Here we have that subject parcel outlined in blue within the Fords Colony subdivision, and that Powhatan Creek watershed boundary outlined in yellow. Moving further into the most recent aerial photography of the site, here's that subject parcel, and that proposed work is going to be coming off right here. And then here we have the existing topography. As you can see, it's fairly flat where the proposed work is, and it kind of slopes off to the right side here. And then pretty much all of this lot is located within the RPA, as well as part of the FEMA floodplain. The total lot size of this property is 0.56 acres, of which 98% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to construct a walkway, patio, and fire pit in the rear of the existing home. The existing single-family dwelling and attached deck were previously approved under CBPA 23-0032. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 395 square feet of new impervious impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA buffer. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1 planting unit or 1 canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 3 shrubs. The applicant has submitted a mitigation plan equaling 2 understory trees and 12 shrubs, thus exceeding the county's mitigation requirements. Just as a note, this proposed mitigation is in addition to what was already approved on the previous Ches Bay exception request. Here is that previous Ches Bay exception request 23-0032. This was the approved site plan. As you can see, there's the existing dwelling and the attached deck here. Moving on, this is the currently proposed site and mitigation plan for that walkway, patio, and fire pit outlined in orange here. The entirety of the proposed work is within that 50 seaward RPA buffer, and we have the additional proposed mitigation plantings included as well. And then recent photography of the site showing where that proposed work is going to go. These are the stairs from that attached deck here. So that walkway and patio will kind of extend out here and kind of finish out right about here. And then looking at that from the other side of the home, again, we see those existing stairs from that attached deck where that patio and walkway will be extending off of and ending with the fire pit right about here. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a walkway, patio, and fire pit. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a walkway, patio, and fire pit is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions outlined before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a surety of $1,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 2 understory trees and 12 shrubs. The applicant must record an affidavit in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the start of construction. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 9th, 2026, and written request for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than February 26th, 2026, or 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Questions for Emily? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody, I will open the public hearing. Would anybody care to address the board?
Hey, good evening, Ryan Linekin with Williams Landscape and Design, 1554 Penniman Road, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188, I believe. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation tonight. Just asking for a patio area for them to be able to have a fire feature in the backyard.
Since you're here, I'll ask you the question.
Yep, go ahead.
Any runoff-related items that you see resulting from the
No,
impervious?
all of the lawn area in there is pretty flat. It's not going to pick up a lot of speed and water. Drainage is already pretty much taken care of. And then the patio itself will be on aggregate base with aggregate screed. And the joints will also be with hydro sand. So it's going to be, to some degree, permeable surface as well. I know that doesn't change any of the non-permeable application, but it will be a permeable surface.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Would anybody else care to address the board? Hearing none, I'll pull the matter back to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair, I would say this is a minor impact, and I would certainly support the staff's recommendation to approve this.
I concur. Any other discussion? I'll close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-25-0025 at 5 Tay River.
Mr. Wilson.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0069 at 108 Colonel Philip Johnson. Amanda.
Evening, Chairman, members of the board. Amanda Frazier, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0069. Ms. Jennifer Bliss of Marquee Homes Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Bruce and Ms. Robin Phillips for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling located at 108 Colonel Philip Johnson within the Kings Mill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1978 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Therefore, the impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA buffer are considered administratively. Here you can see the subject parcel outlined in blue and the watershed boundary in yellow. closer photo of the subject parcel. It is currently wooded. Topography of the lot, the RPA buffer, and floodplain. Total lot size of this property is 0.55 acres, of which 95% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a single-family dwelling. The current case was heard by the board at the February 2025 meeting and was not voted on due to the applicants not being available to answer questions posed by the board. The hearing for this case remained open to be acted on by the board at the March 2025 meeting. The applicants requested a deferral to the April 2025 meeting to present a revised site plan to address the board's concerns. The applicants have proposed 2 rock garden BMPs as additional mitigation measures. However, performance calculations demonstrating the effectiveness of these BMPs have not been provided. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 3,280 square feet of administrative impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA, 795 square feet of legislative impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 4,075 square feet of impacts to the RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 10 planting units, 10 canopy trees, 20 understory trees, and 30 shrubs. The applicants have submitted a mitigation plan equaling 11 planting units, 10 canopy trees, 21 understory trees, and 42 shrubs, therefore exceeding the county's mitigation requirements. This is the site plan showing the existing conditions of the site. This is the site plan that was presented to you at the March meeting. This is the revised site plan showing the 2 rock garden BMPs. I will also note that the staircase to the covered porch at the back of the house has been extended as well. This is what they provided to show the specifications of the rock garden BMP. Current photos of the property. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a single-family dwelling within the seaward 50-foot RPA cannot be approved administratively. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions, which you have before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. If the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. And the applicants must submit a surety of $5,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 11 planting units. The applicants must provide written approval from the Kings Mill Community Services Association for the dwelling as situated crossing the building setback line prior to the building permit issuance. The applicants must record an affidavit with the WJCC courthouse prior to issuance of the building permit. The applicants must submit a letter of installation from a qualified professional to the SRP division prior to the issuance of the final certification of occupancy. This letter must verify compliance with the approved construction plans for stormwater BMP facilities. No surveyed as-built drawings are required. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 9th, 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than February 26, 2026, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. I'll be happy to take any questions at
Any
this
questions
time.
for Amanda?
So the 2 changes from before are 1, the addition of 2 rock gardens and mention of some steps.
Correct.
Regarding the 2 rock gardens, even though there's not mitigation calculations associated with them, does staff have any experience with these types of BMPs? And if so, do you have a preliminary or final assessment as to their effectiveness for this kind of topology and conditions?
Mr. O'Brien, normally, we would get some kind of calculation on the size of, the infiltration chamber underneath the stone. There's no dimensions on the detail, there's no dimensions on the plan, there's, no way to truly evaluate it.
So that previous picture of the rock garden is a generic one.
I would let the applicant address that question.
Any other questions for staff? Hearing none, thank you. We'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant care to address the board? Evening.
Mr. Chairman, staff members, my name is Donald Davis. I'm a land surveyor, Davis and Associates. The address is 3630 George Washington Memorial Highway in Yorktown, Virginia, 23693. I'm here tonight representing the builder, Mr. Well, it's actually Marquis Homes, and the owner of the property is Mr. Phillips. The property is located at number 108 Colonel Philip Johnson in Kings Mill area. I wasn't at the public hearing that you had about a month ago. However, I understand that there are some questions that came up about that, and I'm trying to, if I can, to try and address those. And one of the issues I think that I need to address is there have been some comments about the rock garden that we put there. We have been designing these rock gardens for a number of years. Typically, they don't capture all of the runoff from the site. What they do is they're supposed to capture the 1 inch of runoff to the site, and the rest of it actually goes away. Now, I think which is more important to this is that the amount of mitigation that's being required here, and it's done in compliance with the DEQ and DCR buffer restoration manual. It meets those requirements. There's really no requirement here that I'm aware of that says that you put a rock garden. This was something that was done additionally to provide for additional infiltration into the site itself. The area, I would suggest, may need one change to it if you agree to approve this, and that would be because of the large amount of mitigation that's proposed here. I would suggest that you make it a requirement that you not only have to plant the mitigation here, which is a substantial amount, but that you put in some type of either rock garden around the mitigation to pick up further some of the runoff from the site, or either to have mulched areas there, which would have to be in perpetuity. But that's my suggestion. The site itself, the way it's designed currently, has downspouts that come off of a portion of the roof. They go through a area that is directed towards the rock garden, which these are solid wool pipes. And once it gets into the rock garden, these are perforated pipes. Again, I think this is really, it's over-designed for what's really required here. And there's no requirement that I'm aware of to do the runoff reduction method to be able to determine what is required here for the rock garden. Again, this was based on, and I did this myself, a minimum, if you'll take a look at the site plan, a minimum square footage of each rock garden being 30 square feet. So that's what we're proposing here. I'd be glad to, if I could, to try and answer any questions if you have any.
Davis, I appreciate your presentation. You provided some clarity. And you made a couple points along the way about what is or is not required, and these are above and beyond. Partially, the reason for that is when reviewing these new construction in lots that are now covered by Chesapeake Bay area, we're trying to look at every means possible to give the landowner the opportunity to build, but also mitigate upfront potential issues that we've seen on other properties over time in other communities around James City County. So it's not the heavy hand of regulation. It's more trying to address the issues before they become issues, as we see in numerous applications that come before us. So I appreciate you giving a little bit more clarity on the size of the rock gardens. Any other questions, Mr. Davis, from the board?
I would just add that the reason we were looking for potentially some additional mitigation effort, square footage of the house, not the minimum. In that particular area, I think, I don't know the numbers in front of me, but it was, that was offset to some extent by the fact that the building was pushed, beyond the offset boundaries, so further away from the seaward RPA, so that helps.
That was, I might just point out, that was done on purpose before it ever got to this board. We went to the HOA for Kings Mill and asked if we could get a waiver to be able to move the building closer to the street to lessen the impact of being in the RPA. Again, the rock gardens that we've got shown here would be based on some calculations we could do, but I think more appropriately would be a requirement to have the driveway located with pervious pavers instead of doing this. And we design a lot of these. We work in about 17 to 20 different localities. And we go from Chesapeake to Richmond and so forth. So those are some suggestions that I might suggest that you might want to consider.
Well, if you're essentially speaking for the applicant, if you want to change their plan, it's up to you. I'm not going to change it for them, though. So I'll leave it in your hands.
I'm going to suggest that we stay where we're at right now. But I would suggest that I would tell the applicant later on, assuming this is going to be approved, is that they put pervious pavers there. I mean, they work very well.
Oh.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Davis? Thank you, sir. Would anybody else care to address the board on this matter? We'll pull this matter back to the board for discussion. And it's my understanding, just for clarity, the public hearing was left open at the last meeting, and then it stayed open.
It should have, but it never hurts to reopen it. But yes, it should have been left open since it was deferred.
Thank you.
So for clarification regarding the minimum square footage and the square footage of the proposed dwelling, I don't recall if this was this 20% over, 40% over? I don't recall. Does anybody remember how much larger this was than the minimum?
It was significantly over the minimum, but to the point, the minimum was not established. I think when the minimum was established, it wasn't considering the scale of homes that were being built in Kings Mill, and it's not reasonable for somebody to build a home that small. I don't know how else to say it.
Okay, I remember that now. I remember they were saying that's the house that they would build, but they couldn't essentially. They wouldn't have a market for it.
Yeah.
Okay. One of my concerns about
Mr.
this.
Wilson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. May, we checked the minutes and the house was 50% over the minimum necessary for that section of Kings Mill.
Thank you.
Public hearing is still open. You may.
Phillips, address is Hutton Road, Gloucester, Virginia. The number that was given for the minimum square footage last time was 1,600 square feet. That's incorrect. It's 2,000 square feet is the minimum as soon as you put stairs inside. 1,600 is for a strictly one level, no stairs inside at all. This one was going to have a garage, a room over the garage, so it jumped up to 2,000 square feet. So that percentage was not as bad as, it wasn't the 50%.
And the square footage on this house is around 2,400? Or
100, like 20% over.
Thank you, sir. Is for the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair, one of my, I guess, concerns about a project as presented like this is that we have it is a structure that is larger, and there's, saying we'd like to see additional mitigation to offset that. And as proposed with the rock garden, there's really not as far as like, would one do the job? Would two? Would three? Would four? Like, I guess I don't feel confident that I can just look at that and say that two of those will be sufficient to handle the water without having some additional information, I guess is what I'm.
Understood.
I heard that the square footage on the rock gardens would be 30 square feet each. And do you have, do you have anything that you can share with us with respect to the effectiveness of something like that?
Garden capacity?
Yeah, go ahead.
Chairman, is it okay?
Feel free.
The 30 square feet is a surface area. The gravel that we're using here typically has a void ratio of about 0.29 to 0.41 that would be able to collect the water. Then below, that's 8 inches deep. And then below that, we have another 8 inches of sand, which would basically be able to accept the runoff from the site. And again, the state standard through DEQ requires that you're supposed to have for new construction and new development a 1 inch of rainfall. And again, we didn't do a calculation on this, but this is based on a number of different sites that I've designed over a number of years. And again, the runoff that's coming from the roof tops here is not being directed all towards the rain gardens or the rain areas here.
So the runoff from the roof is being captured by the 6-inch PVC pipe underground to the rock garden, or is it surface water?
A portion of it is, yes.
A portion of it is. Okay. The rain garden accepts both the 6-inch PVC pipe ingress as well as the surface.
That's correct.
Water.
You have an idea of what percentage of water from the roof is going to be collected by the rock gardens?
I can give you an approximate, and it's
Approximate,
just an approximate 40, maybe 50%. All of the roof is not being directed towards these rock gardens, or BMPs, if you want to call them that. All of it's not being directed there. Only a portion of it. If you take a look at the plan, there are downspouts, and the gutters pick up from the downspouts, then go underground through solid wall pipes, and then go towards where the rock gardens are located, or the BMP.
Any other questions for Mr. Davis? Thank you, sir. Any other comments during the public hearing, I'm going to pull it back to the board for discussion, and I will hold that thought for a second. The matter is before the board for discussion. No, this is an ideal. When we've had these situations in the past, we have them more frequently than we'd like probably, tend to get more details in terms of how they're controlling sheet flow moving across the site and how it's being treated. Davis has been in the business for a long time, and I trust his word that he's been doing this for quite some time in terms of constructing and maintaining these facilities. This is the type of mitigation that I was promoting at the last hearing. Although not perfect, I tend to want to support this application.
Yeah, my view is that with this case last month, wasn't any proposed to Rock Gardens. That's above and beyond the mitigation of the planning units. So it's an enhancement, which I consider to be a good thing. And I believe the staff recommendation includes a letter of installation from a certified professional to the Stormwater Division that would verify compliance. So that would be necessary and sufficient for me. So I would be inclined to approve this request.
I would agree with both of you.
Other discussion? With that, I'll close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0069 at 108 Colonel Philip Johnson.
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. McElroy,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda are board considerations. Mr. Wilson, any considerations for the board or matters of special privilege?
No meeting in May.
No meeting in May. Have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.